But 2025, year one of Trump term two, that's a massive cliff. The latest data showing a more than 30% drop in traffic.
With everything going on in the U.S., I feel like a lot of Canadians kind of want to stay home.
Won't be going to the U.S.
No.
We're not going to America. We're not spending our money there. It's Canada first, baby.
Every tally and projection I've seen for 2025 is that the U.S. economy will lose billions of dollars in tourist revenue.
Let's be blunt. The United States is starving for Canadian travelers, and the numbers are now so severe, so one-sided, that Washington can't pretend otherwise. While Donald Trump throws insults across the border and talks about Canada like it's a bargaining chip, the only thing truly collapsing is American tourism. And for the first time in a generation, the message is unmistakable. Canada doesn't need the United States. The United States needs Canada. The shift began slowly, almost quietly, but the impact has grown into something impossible to ignore. Canadians simply stopped going to the U.S. Recent travel data shows that cross-border car trips from Canada have fallen more than 30% in 2025, marking 10 straight months of uninterrupted decline. Not since the immediate aftermath of 9/11 has the movement of Canadians into the United States fallen off a cliff this sharply. Air travel tells the same story. Newly released statistics show that Canadian return flights from the United States have dropped in every single month of 2025, with declines approaching 30% at times. Meanwhile, Canadians are traveling to Europe, Asia, and within their own country more than ever. In other words, the desire to explore hasn't vanished. The desire to visit the United States has. Part of it is policy. With Trump back in the White House, the border has become more intimidating than inviting. His administration introduced rules requiring Canadians who stay more than 29 days to be photographed and fingerprinted. Survey data indicates that a significant majority of Canadians now view the border environment as intrusive or unfriendly. Part of it is rhetoric. Trump's public comments, calling Canada an abuser, saying it should be America's 51st state, even claiming that Canada wouldn't have a country without the United States, struck a nerve. Canadians heard it, they remembered it, and they acted. And finally, part of it is mood. Many Canadians say they no longer feel welcome, no longer feel safe, and no longer feel any obligation to pour their vacation money into a country that keeps poking them in the eye. "We're not spending our money there," one woman said. "We're done." All of this has pushed American states into panic mode. New York, California, and Florida have launched special advertising campaigns practically begging Canadians to return, some offering hefty discounts, others sounding almost apologetic, and a few distancing themselves from Trump entirely. But the campaigns haven't moved the needle. Canadians aren't coming back. To understand why this moment matters, you have to look at America's dependency. Canadian travelers are not a niche group. They are the single largest source of international visitors to the United States. More Canadians visit the U.S. each year than travelers from Europe, Asia, and South America combined. When Canadians stay home, American restaurants, hotels, sports arenas, retail stores, and theme parks feel it immediately. Economic estimates for 2025 show that America stands to lose nearly $6 billion in tourism revenue because Canadians stopped crossing the border. Businesses in border regions are reporting declining attendance, quieter weekends, canceled event tickets, and a noticeable slowdown that used to be unthinkable during peak Canadian travel seasons. In short, Canada isn't just another tourist market, it's the economic lifeline for dozens of American border communities. The more interesting question is why Canadians are reacting this way now, and the answer is that this isn't about currency or cost or the weather. It's political. Canadians do not respond well to disrespect, especially from a neighbor who claims to be an ally. Trump's comments struck a cultural nerve. The new fingerprinting rules made Canadians feel like suspects, and the tariff war created a sense that the U.S. views Canada not as a partner, but as a target. Polling conducted across Canada shows that the number one reason Canadians are canceling U.S. trips is standing up for Canada, and that is new. Canadians have turned travel into a national statement, and they're doing it with their wallets. Here's the part Donald Trump never saw coming. Instead of trying to fight this decline, Canada embraced it. Ottawa launched a full campaign encouraging Canadians to explore their own country. National parks introduced free admission days. Federal museums lowered entry costs. Via Rail offered new family incentives. Provinces stepped up with their own promotions, and tourism boards across the country refocused on domestic travelers. The results have been dramatic. Domestic travel inside Canada is booming. Canadian Airbnb bookings within Canada are way up. Summer spending surged in every province. Billions of dollars that used to flow into American border towns now stay inside Canada, supporting local tourism operators, hotels, museums, and regional attractions from Vancouver Island to Prince Edward Island. Trump's hostility pushed Canadians away. Canada turned that push into a national economic win.
For Americans, the situation is not improving anytime soon. Even with major attractions coming next year, including the FIFA World Cup and America's 250th anniversary festivities, industry forecasts indicate that Canadian travel will not return to pre-Trump levels for at least 5 years. That's half a decade of weakened tourism revenue, thinning hotel occupancy, quieter border towns, and permanent changes in travel habits. This is how long-term economic damage starts, not with a crash, but with millions of small decisions that slowly reshape the landscape. Canadians have made their decision. They'll spend their money where they feel respected, welcomed, and valued. In 2025, that place is not the United States. The United States once assumed Canadians would always come, that the flow of tourists, cars, and dollars was a constant of North American life. Now, that assumption has broken. Trump's rhetoric and policies pushed Canadians away. Canada responded by strengthening its own tourism economy. And now America is left staring at empty hotel rooms, struggling festivals, and border towns, wondering what happened. The truth is simple. The U.S. is starving for Canadian travelers, and for the first time in a generation, Canada doesn't feel any urgency to feed them.
So there is the President of the United States and the President of South Korea. We know President Trump certainly loves gold, and that is quite a gift that he is being gifted right now by the people of South Korea at this big summit.
Wherever Donald Trump travels, the spotlight follows. And this week, the world watched him arrive in South Korea for the APEC summit, only to see something unexpected. Seoul didn't challenge him with confrontation. Instead, it greeted him with a performance of flattery so calculated that it bordered on satire. Before APEC even began, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney had already thrown a punch of his own in Malaysia, calling for maturity and independence in global trade. Two leaders, two continents, and two very different ways of handling America's unpredictable president. This is the story of how South Korea turned diplomacy into theater, and how Canada turned patience into power. In the city of Gyeongju, the South Korean government staged a welcome unlike any other. Cameras flashed as Trump was presented with a gold-plated crown necklace and seated for a banquet carefully designed to play to his ego. The main course? American-style beef patties with ketchup, his favorite condiment. It seemed humorous at first, but this wasn't just about dinner. Behind the ceremony was a sophisticated act of statecraft. Trump had been demanding that Seoul pay as much as $350 billion in upfront contributions or face new 25% tariffs. The Korean side refused. After days of negotiations, the final arrangement reportedly cut the tariff threat to 15%, while South Korea agreed to make targeted investments. No blank checks, only projects with shared control and profit. In essence, Korea paid with symbolism instead of cash. Trump got the applause he craved, Seoul got a balanced deal, and the world witnessed a masterclass in how to tame an unpredictable negotiator without losing face. The real genius of Seoul's approach lay in the details. The gold necklace appealed to Trump's image of grandeur. The hamburger and ketchup played to his New York sensibilities. Then came the dessert, an orange-shaped confection nicknamed the Peacemaker. Observers saw it for what it was, a diplomatic wink. By giving Trump every theatrical cue of victory, Seoul made sure he walked away content. But in substance, the agreement kept South Korea's economic autonomy intact. Each gesture was psychological strategy disguised as hospitality. Gold represented recognition, ketchup, familiarity, and the orange dessert, a gentle mockery of Trump's persona. It was both humor and control, a reminder that soft power can outmaneuver hard demands. By the end of the evening, Trump declared that the deal was virtually done. For Seoul, it was already a quiet whim. For everyone watching, it was proof that diplomacy in 2025 required a mix of charm, calculation, and humor.
As APEC's official sessions began, Trump once again dominated the cameras, but not the agenda. Surrounded by leaders from across Asia and the Pacific, he found himself praised publicly, yet bypassed privately. While Trump highlighted his so-called tariff victories, South Korea, Japan, and ASEAN states spent their meetings strengthening trade frameworks that excluded the United States. These included ongoing technology and supply chain initiatives, first launched during the 2023 ASEAN Economic Framework. The optics were striking. Trump at the center of ceremonies while the rest of the region quietly coordinated economic policies around him. The America First strategy that once commanded fear now drew polite smiles and cautious distance. In 2025, Asia's economies are expected to account for nearly 60% of global growth, according to the IMF's World Economic Outlook. That makes cooperation within the region far more valuable than appeasing Washington's demands. South Korea understood this. Its treatment of Trump wasn't just about humor, it was a signal that Asia could manage its relationships with or without the United States.
Just days before the APEC summit in Kuala Lumpur, Prime Minister Mark Carney delivered what many analysts are calling a defining speech for Canada's modern trade policy. Standing before Southeast Asian leaders, he laid out a plan to double Canada's non-US exports over the next decade, an expansion worth roughly $300 billion in new trade. The figures were not slogans. Ottawa had already concluded or advanced multiple deals in 2025, an investment and energy framework with the European Union in August, a critical minerals partnership with Germany, agricultural and manufacturing accords with Mexico and Ecuador, and, most recently, Canada's first bilateral free trade agreement with Indonesia, announced in September. In Malaysia, Carney confirmed that talks with the broader ASEAN bloc are expected to conclude next year. Canada also signed a letter of intent with Malaysia's Petronas to expand the LNG Canada project in Kitimat, British Columbia, one of the world's largest liquefied natural gas facilities. Phase 2 alone could create tens of thousands of jobs, according to federal estimates. Carney's message was simple but profound. Canada's growth no longer depends on waiting for Washington's approval. The country will build its own network across Asia and Europe, based on stable partnerships and shared prosperity.
While Carney spoke abroad, Ontario Premier Doug Ford was dealing with Trump's outrage at home. Ford's provincial government had funded an advertisement in the U.S. that replayed a 1987 speech by Ronald Reagan criticizing tariffs. The ad aired during the World Series and went viral, reaching more than 11 billion online impressions, according to Canadian media analytics. Trump's reaction was swift. A new 10% tariff on Canadian goods announced mid-flight to Asia. Yet Ford refused to escalate. He simply restated that tariffs hurt both sides, that every dollar taxed on a Canadian product raises costs for American consumers. Carney also chose silence, focusing instead on trade diversification and domestic investment. This contrast, Trump's fury versus Canada's composure, spoke louder than any statement. In diplomatic terms, calm became a weapon. For American audiences, the message landed. Public polls in late October by Ipsos Canada found that more than 60% of Canadians and 52% of Americans now believe tariffs between the two countries do more harm than good. Canada's restraint was paying off in public opinion as well as policy.
Two continents told one story this week. In Asia, South Korea showed how to handle Trump with elegance and irony, feeding his pride while defending its own interests. In Southeast Asia, Canada demonstrated the next stage of Western diplomacy: independence without hostility, strategy without drama. Together, these moments reveal a changing world order. The United States remains powerful, but its allies have learned to navigate it rather than follow it. Soft power, patience, and long-term planning are replacing fear and flattery as the tools of modern leadership. At APEC 2025, Trump wore gold, accepted applause, and claimed victory, but the real winners were those who smiled back and quietly shaped the future. South Korea secured its trade balance. Canada secured its economic direction. And perhaps the clearest lesson from this week is that the rest of the world has finally adapted to the Trump era, not by confronting it, but by outsmarting it.
Provincial anxiety on high as Donald Trump slaps tariffs on a suite of softwood products, with some now up to 45%.
You know, if he can't get a deal, we have to hit back. Yeah. We just have to. And I'm not speaking on behalf of any premier, but my good friend Scott Moe, you know, he has the uranium, he has the potash. The uranium keeps their 94 nuclear facilities going down in the U.S.
When Donald Trump announced his new lumber tariffs, it sounded like another bold strike in his economic war. 10% on softwood lumber, 25% on finished wooden goods, some rising to 45% for furniture and cabinets. The White House framed it as a move to protect American industry. But north of the border, the response was anything but quiet. Ontario Premier Doug Ford didn't mince words. If Canada couldn't get a deal, it had to hit back. That moment captured the shift in tone across Canada. For months, Ottawa had been careful, walking a fine line between diplomacy and defiance. Now, frustration was boiling over. The question was no longer whether to respond, but how hard Canada could push without sparking a full-scale trade war.
The shock hit hardest in the provinces whose livelihoods depend on lumber. In British Columbia, mills had barely recovered from past tariff rounds when the new duties landed. Furniture manufacturers in Quebec warned that thousands of jobs could vanish as U.S. buyers turned away. And in Ontario, Ford's government saw an opportunity, not just to defend industry, but to strike back on the same political field Trump had mastered. Within days, Ontario launched a $75 million media campaign across U.S. networks. The message was simple: tariffs don't punish Canada, they punish Americans. The ads spoke directly to homeowners, contractors, and small businesses, the very voters who form the heart of Trump's support base. Ford's move wasn't just economic defense, it was political counter-messaging aimed at the American heartland. Meanwhile, in Ottawa, Prime Minister Mark Carney stayed cautious. He was still negotiating sectoral deals on steel, aluminum, and energy, hoping to keep the door open for broader relief. His silence on lumber frustrated Western leaders, who saw their industries bleeding. But it also reflected a delicate calculation. Retaliation could cost Canada leverage just as technical talks were gaining traction. Still, unity was cracking. Ford's aggressive posture and British Columbia's anger contrasted with Carney's restraint. The old Team Canada facade was fading, replaced by a more regional, competitive voice. For Trump, the lumber tariff fit perfectly into his political playbook. It was a quick way to look tough on trade at a time when inflation and a budget standoff were eroding confidence. He invoked Section 232, a law meant for national security emergencies, to justify the move, giving him sweeping power without Congress. It was strong optics, but economically, it was a high-risk bet. The United States imports more than 75% of its softwood lumber from Canada. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, Canadian wood feeds roughly 1/3 of American housing construction each year. With new tariffs up to 45%, the cost of building a single-family home in the United States could rise by tens of thousands of dollars. Analysts at the National Association of Home Builders have warned that higher lumber prices already add about $35,000 to the price of a new house compared with pre-tariff levels. That means the people footing the bill aren't Canadian exporters. They're American families, builders, and small contractors. Trump may have scored a headline, but the economics told a different story. While Washington turned up the pressure, Canadian provinces began reminding everyone of the leverage they actually hold. Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe pointed out that his province supplies uranium and potash critical to 94 nuclear facilities in the United States. Ontario exports electricity and refined minerals that keep factories running in Michigan and New York. Quebec provides aluminum essential for the U.S. automotive and aerospace industries. Each of those sectors represents a pressure point. If Ottawa chose to target even a fraction of them, the effects would ripple deep into the American economy. Energy prices would climb and defense manufacturing could slow. Even without formal retaliation, the mere hint of restrictions from Canada unsettles markets because the two economies are so tightly bound. For Ford and other provincial leaders, that interdependence is the real battlefield. They are signaling that Canada no longer needs to beg for exemptions. It can negotiate from strength by using the same tools Trump wields: cost and leverage. By mid-October, the first signs of blowback were already visible. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce warned that the lumber tariffs would compound inflationary pressures and drive up construction costs. Building materials indexes began to rise, mirroring the trend that followed earlier steel and aluminum duties. In states like Michigan, Minnesota, and New York, all heavily linked to Canadian trade, developers reported delays and cancellations as import costs surged. Housing affordability, already a national concern, faced another squeeze. The Federal Reserve's latest data show housing materials contributing roughly 0.4 percentage points to inflation growth in the third quarter of 2025. A sustained rise in lumber costs could double that impact within months. For the White House, that's dangerous territory. Trump's promise to make housing affordable and revive domestic production now collides with a policy that does the opposite. His core voters, construction workers, small builders, and middle-class homeowners, are the ones absorbing the shock. The irony is unmistakable. A tariff meant to defend American jobs is eroding the very sector that employs them. And politically, the optics are shifting. Governors across the Great Lakes region, both Republican and Democrat, are quietly urging restraint, fearing job losses in cross-border industries. What began as a symbol of strength is turning into a drag on U.S. growth and a headache for Trump's re-election narrative. In this standoff, Doug Ford has become an unexpected protagonist. His call to hit back wasn't just a slogan, it was a statement that Canada won't absorb endless economic blows without response. The Ontario campaign targeting American voters flipped the script, showing that Canada can fight a communications war on U.S. soil using the same populist language Trump perfected. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Carney continues the quieter work of negotiation, keeping doors open while the provinces flex their own muscles. It's an uneasy partnership. Ford's blunt approach draws headlines, while Carney's caution buys time. But together, they reveal a new reality. Canada is no longer reacting, it is recalibrating its power. Trump's lumber tariff was meant to prove control. Instead, it exposed dependence. The U.S. economy, intertwined with its northern neighbor, cannot isolate itself without self-inflicted pain. As inflation creeps higher and construction slows, the message becomes clearer. Protectionism may win applause, but it loses the math. In the end, Ford's defiance and Carney's diplomacy tell the same story. The era when Washington dictated and Ottawa complied is fading fast. Trump wanted to show power. Instead, he reminded Canada how much power it already had.
When it comes to trade relations, the future of the North American economy is at stake.
I am optimistic about the future because I look at the past.
Canadians staying home, that's their business. If you want to ban American alcohol, that's fine. There are reasons why the president and some of his team refer to Canada as being mean and nasty to deal with.
When the American ambassador lashes out at Canada, does it reveal U.S. frustration or Canadian resilience? That question surfaced after Pete Hoekstra, speaking in Halifax, dismissed Ottawa's Elbows Up campaign as anti-American. His criticism was meant as a warning, yet many Canadians interpreted it as proof that their pushback is being felt in Washington. Far from backing down, people across the country felt encouraged to stand taller, to buy Canadian goods, and to view the dispute as a chance to show unity. What was framed as an insult ended up reinforcing confidence that Canada's defensive stance is not only necessary, but effective.
The spark for this moment lies in Washington's tariff strategy. Under President Trump's second term, reciprocal tariffs have been rolled out aggressively. In March 2025, the White House imposed a 25% duty on imported cars and auto parts under Section 232. By July, a 50% tariff on copper was added, alongside restrictions on high-grade scrap copper. Steel and aluminum remain under heavy duties as well. The Department of Commerce itself confirmed that these sectoral tariffs are designed to expand beyond metals, and Canadian producers have been bracing for the next wave. What this has created is not compliance, but uncertainty. Business leaders in both countries point to the same reality. Investments stall when duties appear and disappear at a president's discretion. For Canadians, the lesson is clear. Trump's strategy has not weakened their resolve. Instead, it has driven consumers to buy Canadian, reinforced a culture of resilience, and made clear that reliance on American goodwill is a risk too great to ignore.
The Prime Minister kicked it off by traveling to Mexico last week for a summit without America. Mark Carney and his Mexican counterpart, Claudia Sheinbaum, signed an agreement aimed at deepening trade and investment between the two countries.
That realization explains why Prime Minister Mark Carney moved quickly to deepen ties with Mexico. Just days before Halifax, Carney met President Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico City and signed a bilateral agreement on trade and investment. This was no symbolic gesture. It was the first step in repositioning Canada inside North America's supply chain ahead of the 2026 review of the Trade Pact. By linking arms with Mexico, Canada shows that it can look beyond Washington. The Trudeau years often left Canada reacting to U.S. policy, but Carney is signaling a different path. Mexico offers a growing market for Canadian agriculture, energy, and manufacturing inputs. More importantly, this partnership sends a message to Washington that Ottawa is not negotiating alone. It also reassures Canadian businesses that the government is actively seeking stability. For farmers worried about canola exports or for auto suppliers nervous about new tariffs, the Mexico deal represents a lifeline. It does not erase the challenges of U.S. duties, but it creates an environment where Canadian producers can plan with greater confidence, knowing alternative channels are being built. Canada is searching out options in Europe, in Asia, and even cautiously in China, but Mexico is the most immediate and powerful lever. It transforms American pressure into an opportunity to rewire continental trade flows.
The review of the USMCA, or CUSMA in Canada, will not erase the agreement. Few expect it to disappear. What is far more likely is a tightening of rules of origin, making it harder for Canadian products to qualify for duty-free access. That prospect is serious, yet it does not erase the shift we are witnessing now. American frustration, voiced bluntly in Halifax, has not intimidated Canadians. Instead, it has accelerated their search for partners and renewed their confidence in standing firm. Tariffs that were meant to corner Canada have united its consumers, its industries, and its leaders. Trump may say he loves tariffs, but the more he leans on them, the more Canada looks outward and discovers new strength. If Washington's disappointment is what fuels Canadian pride, then the balance of advantage in North America is already beginning to tilt in a new direction.